Welcome back, guys. Let me discuss the first bug from our list. Let me show you how to impersonate a user via insecure login. In this video, I'm going to show you what kind of severe consequences can happen at the intersection of login functionality and insecure session management. So let me first discuss a story so that you've got an understanding of the problem. Let's assume that the user is logged out and the session ID of the user, in short SID, is ABC, just for the simplicity. And this is a non-authenticated session ID because the user is logged out. Okay? Next, the attacker comes in and the attacker learns a user's session ID. Well, it is useless at this moment because the user is logged out. So the attacker cannot do anything with this information. But let's carry on our story and you will see what interesting can happen later on. So next, the user logs in to the web application and the user provides, for example, email and password. And after that, the user is authenticated and the user is recognized by session ID. And this is authenticated session ID at this time, right? So the user has been authenticated after providing email and password. And now the only piece of data that is used by the web application to recognize the user is the session ID. This is how web application works. Now we are talking about authenticated session ID because the user is authenticated. So far, so good. Now let's assume that the session ID, in short SID, has not been regenerated at the time of authentication. In other words, it has still the same value. So let's assume that the value of SID is still ABC. Now we've got something very interesting from the attacker's point of view, because now the attacker can impersonate a user. Because look at that. At this moment, non-authenticated session ID is equal to authenticated session ID. They are the same. We've got still the same SID. So at the very beginning of the story, when the user was logged out, the session ID that the attacker was able to learn was useless because the user was logged out. But now the user is logged in using the same value of session ID, so now this is no longer useless to the attacker. Now the attacker can use this session ID to get access to the user's account because, as I told you, once the user is successfully authenticated, then the only piece of data that is used by the web application to recognize the user is session ID. Can you see that? It's beautiful. This kind of intersection of very sensitive functionality like login and broken session management. And you see that it can lead to very severe consequences. Now I believe that you understand what is going on in the story. So I'm going to jump right now to the demo because I can't wait to present it to you in practice, how you can, actually see if this kind of problem happens in the web application or not. So let's jump to the demo.